Hello, this is for week 5, or week 8, reflection prompt. Descartes thought the body was basically a machine, something that runs on its own without any inner life. On his view, experience belongs entirely to the mind, which is a completely different kind of thing from flesh and bone. The body doesn't feel anything, it just processes. The mind does all the experiencing, and it connects to the body only in the most mysterious way. Descartes' starting assumption is the real problem, not the gap he finds. Descartes looks at the fact that no physical description of brain activity captures what pain actually feels like from the inside, and concludes the mind must be a separate, non-physical thing. That move sounds logical, but only works if you already accept that physical processes have no inner life by definition. That's not a discovery, it's a starting assumption he never questioned. Whitehead goes after the assumption directly rather than accepting the gap and trying to explain it away. If you allow that physical process to carry some form of experience in them, the gap looks less like proof of a separate mind and more like limitation in how Descartes imagined matter could work. And to reference that to chapter 3, Miesel's point in chapter 3 that Descartes' dualism makes the most ordinary events of embodied life impossible, like moving a hand or feeling hunger because a non-spatial mind can't push on a physical body. Whitehead thinks this gets it backwards. He makes a point that sounds simple but carries enormous implications. You don't see through your eyes the way someone peers through a window. You see with your eyes. Take the eyes away and the seeing stops entirely. There is no tiny observer sitting behind your eyes and using them as lenses. The eyes themselves are doing the seeing. Experience isn't happening somewhere behind the body, it's happening in and through the body. The body isn't a vehicle your mind rides around in. It's where experience lives. This raises a difficult question, though. Scientists can describe what happened in your brain when you stub your toe, tracing the electrical signals and chemical reactions in precise detail. And none of that description tells you what the pain actually feels like from the inside. Descartes uses this gap to argue that the mind must be doing something separate from the body. His reasoning went roughly like this. If a complete physical description of the brain still leaves out what experience feels like, then experience must belong to something the physical description can't capture, which is the mind. The mind on this view is the part of you that actually feels things, and it can't be reduced to neurons or chemistry or anything material at all. Whitehead's response is to challenge the starting assumption rather than accept the gap and try to bridge it. Descartes assumes that physical processes by their very nature have no inner life, they just happen mechanically with nothing it is like to be them. But Whitehead thinks that the assumption is the problem, not the solution. If you allow that physical processes, including the ones happening in your body right now, have some form of experience built into them, then the gap looks less like proof of separate mind and more like a failed imagination about what matter can do. The body's experience doesn't need a separate mind to explain it because the body was never just a machine in the first place. Your reflection should wrestle with whether it's satisfying as an answer or just moves through the mystery resolving it. And I already kind of touched on that, but I have more points here. The seeing with your eyes point is stronger than it first looks. Whitehead's claim that you see with your eyes rather than through them sounds almost obvious until you follow it all the way. It means there's no separate observer hiding behind the body using it as equipment. The body isn't a vehicle the mind rides around in. Experience is happening in the physical process itself, not somewhere above it. This directly dismantles the Cartesian picture without needing to solve the gap Descartes identified. Because the gap only exists if you grant the starting position that bodies can't experience anything. And to reference this into the reading in chapter 3, Miesel's example, Mesle's example, remove the eyes and the seeing stops. which proves the experience belongs to the organ, not to something behind it. The hard question is whether Whitehead actually resolves the mystery or just relocates it. This is where honest critical analysis earns points. Whitehead says physical processes have experience built into them, which closes the gap Descartes identified. But that raises its own question. What does it mean for a subatomic particle to have an experience? Mesley, I'm pretty sure that's how you say it, stretches the words feeling experience to cover everything from electrons to human, which is a bold philosophical move. The question is whether stretching those words that far still leaves them meaning anything, or whether calling electrons energy relationship is a feeling just relabeling the mystery with a different vocabulary. In chapter 4, where Mesley explicitly acknowledges he's stretching language and asks readers to take an imaginative leap rather than a logical step. Mesley makes a point in chapter 3 that's easy to miss because it's buried in the middle of an argument. He notes that people who have experienced severe trauma sometimes disassociate from their bodies precisely because bodily experience is so powerful and the damage is so real, and I know that firsthand. I won't even share. That's on a side note. That's evidence that the body isn't a vehicle the mind observes from a distance. When what happens to the body is bad enough, the only way to survive psychologically is to try to break the connection Whitehead says was never really breakable, which I know, more than anything else in this world, I know pain and disassociation more than anything else. The fact that disassociation is even a response people have confirms how deeply experience is rooted in the body, because you wouldn't need to escape something that wasn't actually where you live. And whether it's satisfying depends on what you think a philosopher has to do. If a satisfying answer means eliminating mystery entirely, Whitehead doesn't deliver that. Nobody does. But if a satisfying answer means replacing an incoherent framework with a more coherent one that accounts for more of actual experience without requiring a supernatural explanation, which I think a lot of people actually want, then Whitehead does better than Descartes. Descartes' dualism can't explain how a non-spatial mind moves a physical body. Whitehead's view doesn't have that problem because it never splits the two apart in the first place. The mystery of what experience is like from the inside remains, but it's no longer being used to justify a framework that breaks down the moment to try to apply it.